I wish I never introduced you with that.
Madeline, we're gonna need to let him talk.
You want a problem with me, continue to defend so him.
Luke, are you and Madeline still together?
Yes.
Yes. Madeline,
Get out of
yes
there, bro.
or no, are you and Luke still together?
No, I am seriously.
They had a whole wedding. Outfits, cake, drama, the works. But guess what they never had? A legal marriage certificate. And now, somehow, they're back applying for a K-1 Fiancé visa. Yes, the same visa meant for couples who aren't married yet. Not divorced. Not separated. Unmarried. So now we're looking at Luke living in the US, Meline still in Colombia, and both of them pretending like the wedding we all watched didn't count? There's something deeply off about the way they're playing both sides here. On one hand, they call each other husband and wife. On the other hand, they're filing paperwork like two strangers just starting the process. You don't throw an entire production-level wedding and then circle back to a visa meant for before the wedding. That's like burning the cake and then trying to put the eggs back in the fridge. When the host asked about the K-1, even Anthony couldn't stay quiet. How are you applying for a Fiancé visa if you're already married? And the response? A full pivot. Luke admits they never filed the paperwork in Colombia. That whole over-the-top ceremony, it was just vibes. Legally, nothing ever happened. It's hard to tell if they're clueless or just shameless. And it only gets messier. The way they explain it, they got engaged, filed the K-1, waited too long, said forget it, and did a wedding in Colombia instead. Then magically, right after the wedding, the visa starts moving. So they backtrack. They don't legalize anything. They keep the wedding decorative and try to resume the K-1 route, which means they're now in this gray area of not quite married, but also not single, while playing the immigration system like it's a dress rehearsal. You'd think one of them would be nervous about this loophole blowing up in their face, but neither of them flinched. Not once. And that's when you start wondering, was the wedding ever about the marriage? Or was it always about the camera time? They hired photographers, popped champagne, staged vows, and threw a tantrum or two, all while knowing full well that none of it would count on paper. No judge, no legal filing, no signature that would make any of it real. And yet, they still called each other husband and wife like the cameras were the only stamp they needed. Think about that. Every guest at that wedding, every dollar spent, every meltdown along the way, it all led to a wedding that legally never happened. Not even accidentally. Not even delayed. Just deliberately skipped. Luke says they made that decision together. But whose idea was it really? Because when people backtrack like that, it usually means someone's pulling the strings and someone else is cleaning up the mess. And if they were willing to fake a finish line just to make the K-1 work again, what else have they been willing to fake along the way? Because there's a big difference between cultural misunderstanding and strategic stalling. One's messy, the other's manipulative. What's worse is the way they defend it. We still consider ourselves married. That's not how immigration works. That's not how marriage works. That's not even how logic works. It's like saying, I consider myself graduated because you threw a cap in the air. Nobody's asking for a Harvard diploma. But when you lie about the basics, everything else starts to smell. And this wasn't a couple that looked confused. It was a couple that looked comfortable. Way too comfortable. Selling the illusion of commitment without backing it up with anything that counts. So when Meline stands there talking about how real it felt, you have to ask, real to who? Because it sure looks like the only thing they made official that day was their camera angle. First, she says it slipped out of her pocket after a car breakdown. Then, she tells Luke it disappeared at the gym. Two completely different settings, two completely different stories. One supposedly precious ring. You'd think losing a wedding ring would be a moment you'd never forget, especially if that ring symbolized a marriage you keep insisting is real. But Meline's version changes depending on who's asking. That's not memory loss. That's narrative control. And when someone's that loose with the details around something that emotional, something symbolic, something public, it doesn't just raise eyebrows. It breaks trust, because now it's not about the ring. It's about the fact that she needed Luke's ring next. She told him to bring his wedding band to Colombia. Not to wear, not to keep safe, to take it apart, to melt it down, to turn his band into two new rings for both of them. That's not romantic. That's strategic. That's reframing a loss into a power move. She loses hers. She rewrites his. Now she controls both. And the story doesn't stop at the melting. Because after all that, Luke still doesn't have the rings. They were supposed to be remade, reset, and returned, but they're nowhere to be seen. And he doesn't push, he just accepts it. Meanwhile, she says she was devastated to lose hers. But devastated people don't go silent. They don't hold on to someone else's ring for months. They don't tell different stories to different people and expect no one to compare notes. The more you listen to her timeline, the more it feels less like an accident and more like a clean reset. Like someone quietly rewriting what their relationship looks like, one missing item at a time. Because if the ring really meant something, wouldn't she have fought harder to find it, not harder to reshape it? Nobody said it directly. But everyone in that studio was thinking the same thing. The ring didn't just vanish. It was never lost. It was moved. Maybe sold. Maybe pawned. Maybe sacrificed for something she needed more than symbolism. And when someone's story flips from gym bag to car pocket, and they still end up with control over the other person's wedding band, you don't need a smoking gun, you need common sense. The logic doesn't hold. And neither does the sympathy. Because when Meline's story came up, she wasn't emotional. She was calculated. Not, how do I fix this, but how do I spin this? Luke says she asked to use the diamonds in his ring, not because it was a sentimental thing, but because she wanted to make 2 new ones. Equal rings, equal power, equal rewrite. But here's the problem. If she lost hers because of carelessness, why was the solution to destroy his? Why not replace hers with her own effort, her own design, her own gesture? The second you rework someone else's wedding ring without finishing your legal paperwork, it stops being about commitment and starts looking like control. And the more they spoke, the more things stopped adding up. Luke never asked for his ring back. He never got an update. Meline said she wanted to surprise him, but the only surprise here is how quietly she shifted the spotlight off herself and onto the new project. It's the kind of emotional misdirection that makes people look loyal on the outside while staying 5 steps ahead underneath. Because when someone keeps rewriting history with a smile, the only thing more dangerous than what they're hiding is how calm they are while doing it. He didn't come in quiet. Brian arrived with attitude, history, and a smirk that said he already knew whose side he was on. And maybe that's what burned the most. Because before he was Luke's bro, he was Meline's friend. Her contact. Her connection. The one she vouched for. So when he started talking, and it was all about how badly she treats Luke, how toxic he thinks she is, how he's seen the real her, it didn't just feel like betrayal. It felt like war. Meline didn't hide it. The second he opened his mouth, her body language changed. She was locked in, hands moving, voice rising. No more pretending. I wish I never introduced you to him. That's not frustration. That's regret. Because in her mind, Brian flipped sides. And when someone flips on you after knowing your messiest truths, they're not just a threat. They're dangerous. Especially when they come armed with receipts. The studio wasn't ready for what came next. Brian claimed Meline had manipulated Luke emotionally, financially, and mentally. He said he distanced himself from her because he couldn't watch it anymore. And Meline? She wasn't scared. She was furious. Because she knew what was coming. The flashback. The bachelor party. The stripper. The cake in Luke's face. The moment that became the biggest fight of their season. That party, the one Brian helped plan, wasn't just a wild night. It was a trigger. A test. A setup. And when it aired again on screen, every cast member watching had the same reaction. Meline's response wasn't healthy. It wasn't fair. It wasn't okay. But that's not how she sees it. Because in her world, Brian is the root. The whisperer. The instigator. The reason Luke started pulling away in the first place. So when she demands Luke cut Brian off completely, it's not about loyalty. It's about survival. When a man takes out a loan against his only investment property in a foreign country just to invest in someone else's business, you expect a plan. You expect documents. You expect proof. Luke had none. He handed Brian $150,000 based on a dream and a handshake, and now that money is gone. Not missing, gone. The gold business that was supposed to fund their future, give them freedom, fix their distance, vanished into thin air. And when people started asking questions, Brian came back with a story so wild, it almost felt rehearsed. He said there was a robbery, that he was kidnapped, that goats were involved, tied up, held hostage, like a Netflix script without the budget. Meline didn't buy a word of it, neither did the rest of the cast. But Luke, he sat there, calm, almost embarrassed, but not outraged. And that's the part no one could understand. This isn't pocket change. This isn't a bad dinner. This is debt that follows you. Debt that destroys credit, leverage, and peace. And yet, Luke kept defending Brian. Said he still considers him one of his closest friends. Said he believes he'll pay it back. Which raises the real question. Was this blind loyalty or willful denial? Because anyone watching could see what was happening. Brian played into Luke's desperation, offered a shortcut to success, and Luke, already scrambling to keep up with Meline's expectations, took the bait. It's not even about whether Brian's lying. It's about why Luke gave him that kind of access in the first place. And if you look closely, you'll see it. Luke never wanted a business partner. He wanted a fix, a rescue, a chance to feel in control of something, anything. But when you try to fix your life with borrowed dreams and someone else's promises, you don't build a future. You build a trap. She drew the line, plain and final. Brian or me. No compromise, no maybe later. Not after the money vanished, not after the betrayal, not after the party that broke everything. Meline was done negotiating. And Luke? He nodded. He agreed. And then he ignored it. Not loudly, not rebelliously. He just kept calling Brian, kept texting, kept hoping for a fix. Because for Luke, Brian wasn't just a friend. He was the shortcut to a life he didn't know how to build on his own. That's what made it dangerous. This wasn't about loyalty. This was about dependency. About clinging to someone who promised easy answers in a life full of hard ones. Luke still believed Brian would pay him back. Still believed the debt would dissolve, the trust would return, the tension would fade. And while he waited for that to happen, his marriage started slipping away right in front of him. Meline watched it happen in real time. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She broke. Quietly. Then loudly. Then completely. Because when a woman already feels like she's been used, lied to, and sidelined, seeing her partner defend the man she blames for all of it doesn't just sting, it confirms every worst fear. Meline had her flaws, but in that moment, she needed Luke to choose. And he didn't. Or maybe he couldn't. Because whether it was comfort, fear, or ego, Luke never cut the cord. Not when Meline asked. Not when the debt ballooned. Not when the relationship hit the wall. He kept hoping both worlds could exist. That Brian would clean up the mess. That Meline would understand. That everything would settle without him having to sacrifice. But love doesn't work like that. Not when trust is already cracked. Not when one wrong move can collapse the whole illusion. And the moment he said, "I love Brian" on stage, Meline didn't hear friendship. She heard divorce. She said the words like a sentence she'd been rehearsing for months. This is a sign from the universe. We're done. Not a pause, not a fight, a full-on ending. And still, Luke didn't flinch. He didn't argue, didn't react, didn't even raise his voice. Because he's heard it before. Again and again. Meline ends things in heat, and then pulls them back in silence. They've done this breakup so many times, it doesn't land anymore. It's not a decision. It's a routine. And that's the real problem. This relationship doesn't run on trust or compromise, it runs on volatility. Explosions followed by apologies, chaos followed by silence. That's the glue. So when Meline says she's done, Luke doesn't hear finality. He hears delay. He assumes she'll cool off, change her mind, send a message in 2 days asking about her visa. Because that's what always happens. But this time, something shifted. She said it in front of everyone. On a stage, with receipts behind her, with the ring story still hanging, the money still missing, and Brian still very much in the picture. And for once, Meline didn't blink. She didn't double back. She didn't clean up after herself. That should have been Luke's signal to respond, to fight, or at least react. But he didn't. He kept playing the long game. He said, "There's a lot going on today. She'll feel differently tomorrow." That's not love. That's emotional autopilot. That's a man who doesn't listen, because he doesn't think anything she says is permanent. Which raises the bigger question. Why would she ever leave, if every dramatic exit gets met with calm detachment? Why would he ever change, if every consequence resets by morning? And if both people stop believing anything is final, how does anything ever get real? She dropped the hammer on stage. No hesitation, no soft voice, no looking for backup. We're over. Said it straight into the mic, with the whole cast watching and no way to walk it back. And Luke barely blinked. Not a tear, not a protest, not even a crack in his voice. Just a slow nod, like he was watching reruns of his own relationship unravel for the 100th time. You could see it land differently for the rest of the room. The host looked confused. The cast shifted uncomfortably. Even Meline paused for a second, like she was waiting for some kind of emotional response. But Luke didn't give her one. Not because he didn't care. Because he didn't have anything left to give. That's what emotional burnout looks like, when the fights stop being sharp and start being background noise. When you've broken up so many times that the next breakup feels like brushing your teeth. Meline was throwing a grenade, and Luke was just sitting in it. Calm, detached, too tired to duck. And that's what makes it worse. Because this wasn't two people falling apart in private. This was televised heartbreak, with timelines, receipts, witnesses, and neither one looked like they were fighting for the other anymore. Meline wanted a reaction. Luke gave her routine. It's not love, it's not hate, it's numbness. And when numbness becomes the default, you don't argue to fix, you argue to feel something. Anything. And if nothing sticks, nothing lands, nothing moves the other person even slightly, it means the connection is already dead. You're just dragging the body around for appearances. So when the stage lights go down and the cameras cut, what's really left? A plan? A visa? Or two people so used to falling apart that they stopped noticing when they broke? They built a whole storyline on the word married, but never filed a single document to prove it. Said they were husband and wife, but couldn't produce a license. Wore rings, lost rings, melted rings, but never returned them. Talked about starting fresh in the US, while dragging a mess of contradictions no lawyer could clean up. Everything about Luke and Meline's story feels like a performance, with no follow-through. And once you step back, it's all the same pattern repeating in different forms. The wedding was never made legal. The K1 was reactivated like a forgotten backup plan. The ring loss was patched with a story that changed depending on the audience. The money was loaned out without contracts. The friend who ruined it all is still somehow a friend. Every one of those threads, whether emotional or legal or financial, is covered in the same fingerprints, shortcuts, avoidance, denial. Neither of them was building something. They were buying time. Luke wanted stability, but couldn't afford it, literally or emotionally. Meline wanted security, but never trusted the hands that were offering it. And in the middle of it all, you had a wedding that meant nothing, a loan that wrecked everything, and a relationship so bruised it forgot what a future even looked like. They weren't partners. They were passengers on the same broken flight, hoping the turbulence would stop without ever fixing the engine. That's why every solution led to another contradiction. That's why every commitment had an escape hatch. And that's why when Meline said, "This is a sign from the universe," she meant it. Not because she believed in fate, but because she finally saw what everyone else had already figured out. And maybe that's the question that never got answered. Was this ever about love? Or was it two people trying to outrun their own stories, using each other as the disguise?